Hi guys, and welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be doing a character file review on Del Boy from Only Fools and Horses. So Del is obviously, there we go, there's Del Boy there. Del Boy was played by David Jason in Only Fools and Horses, and he was also played by James Buckley in the prequel to Only Fools and Horses, Rockin' Ships. Rockin' Ships is a very good one. I've actually reviewed it on the channel, so please go and check that video out, because I enjoyed making that video and I'd love you guys to go over there and watch it. So yeah, Del Boy, what can I say about Del Boy? Derek Edward Trotter. So Del Boy is one of those characters. He's a small man with a big personality and big ideas, and he's just got a lot of ambition, really. He wants to achieve loads of stuff that you don't think he's going to make it. All he wants to be is a millionaire, and you just got to see how he tries to get there. So, in Only Fools and Horses as a whole, we first meet Del in the first ever episode of Only Fools and Horses, Big Brother. Big Brother shows quite clear, and it gets the message across that Del is that big brother who's very overprotective of Rodney. They seem to clash a lot, because Del is sort of a control freak. He sort of takes control too much and is sort of just wants to always be there for Rodney and just sort of annoying, basically. But sometimes can be a bit upsetting for Rodney, which could lead Rodney to lose out on opportunities, e.g. in the episode The Royal Flush, which is an episode which shows a proper downside to Del Boy's character, showing that Del is a bit too controlling to the point where he straight up ruined Rodney's opportunity with Victoria, which is very sad, and it was all his fault just for mucking around, doing something stupid, and it was all Del's fault. And it doesn't paint Del in a good light in that episode particularly. But besides getting that annoying bit out of the way, Del is way too overprotected. He cares too much for Rodney and for the rest of the Trotter family. He's just he's always there. But the thing is, though, with Del, he's got a bit of charm, he's got that wheeler dealer sort of thing, the vibe he's got. He enjoys going out, trying to make money. Sometimes he doesn't make any money at all, but sometimes he does, which is a good thing, really. But Del Boy as a character, he's quite distinctive, a very distinctive man. As I said, Del Boy is a small guy with big ideas and a big personality, so it makes him, he stands out in comparison to loads of other people. And he's just a really great, this is the bobblehead of Del Boy there. There we go. David Jason does an absolutely amazing job in all 7 series of Only Fools and Horses, and of course all the specials and everything. But we're also going to be talking about Del's character development. So Del, from his origins in Big Brother, the first ever episode of Only Fools and Horses, Del, straight off the bat, you see that he's more controlling, and he just wants the best out of everyone. He also wants to game stuff for himself as well. Yeah. I also really do like the dynamic that Del has with his friends, e.g. Boise, Trigger, Mike, Denzel. And I really enjoy their relationship. I think it's really great, because Boise is like sort of very opposite to Del. He's very snobbish. He thinks he's better than everyone else. He just sort of has that character that he's way better and more superior. So when Del does become a millionaire, in spoilers, Time on Your Hands, the episode released in 1996, Boise seemed a bit gutted there, because he always thought that he had the most money, sort of thing. But also, his relationship with Denzel, obviously he ruined Denzel's life in numerous occasions, e.g. taking his redundancy money in I believe One Door Closes, that's the name of the episode. And he also did up, he did up their flats. Del Boy and Rodney and Grandad did up their flat, and basically they thought they'd killed a canary, and they actually hadn't. So they ended up buying a canary for £45. So yeah, mental stuff really. Also, the other thing that I need to mention about Denzel's relationship with Del, Del basically ruined Denzel and Corinne's wedding day by saying everything that they had ordered had gone manky. Whether that was actually true or not, who knows? Unbelievable. Also, I do like Del's relationship with Trigger, because Del is quite stupid as a character. So when you have him next to Trigger, Del seems really, really intelligent. And that's mental, because Del is quite, he's not the brightest person in the world. He's not the sharpest tool in the box either. But he just is sort of, he's dumb but intelligent at the same time. Like, he acts really stupid quite a lot of the time, but he does have an air of cunningness, which he uses quite a lot throughout Only Fools and Horses. So that's really intriguing. But yeah, having Trigger next to him makes Del seem immediately more intelligent, which kind of juxtaposes their relationship as well, which I think is really interesting, and I do enjoy that dynamic as well. So that's really cool. And obviously, Dave Jason and Roger Lloyd Pack have that really good relationship. As Trigger is completely clueless as a character, so I really do like their dynamic. But Del and Rodney, going back to Del and Rodney, as I mentioned earlier, I do like their dynamic, and Del does really need to let Rodney go, because in the episode where Rodney wants to, I think it's something called Rockstar episode. It's the episode where Rodney joins a band and he's a drummer and he wants to be, they want to be on top of the pops. They want to sell albums. They want to do all of this stuff, and then Del interferes in that. He interferes in that. He says, "Oh, I'm going to become your manager and do all of that." So he ends up doing all of that, and it doesn't exactly end well, because Del being so interfering in Rodney's life caused everyone in Rodney's band to straight up kick him out. So Mental Mickey and all of them, the bunch of Wallies as they were called, and they managed to get on top of the pops. So Rodney found out they had got on top of the pops, and he was so angry with Del, because Del was like trying to leave the house. I was like, "Oh, the TV's broken." Obviously, because the bunch of Wallies were on the TV, it made Rodney so upset. And there's a really great line at the end of the episode where Rodney says, I always believed that they would make it, but you convinced me they couldn't." And then, and Del says, "Well, you're too shrewd." So I really do enjoy that sort of that dynamic, because it's like they can't live without each other. They'll always need each other. But Del just he's got to let Rodney go. I feel like sometimes in the episodes he can be a bit too clingy, and I really do enjoy that relationship between David Jason and Nicholas Lyndhurst. I think their sort of chemistry together, and the way they sort of bounce off each other, where they're sort of, one minute they're all happy and laughing, joking or whatever, and then the next minute they're at each other's throats. And I think that's really cool to show their dynamic, because I think Only Fools and Horses, despite it obviously being a very funny comedy, really brilliant and stuff like that, like a really brilliant comedy and all of that, but it does have some dramatic moments in it, and I think that really works, particularly for Del and Rodney. They may look like funny characters. Actually, deep down there are some serious that sort of issues going on between them two brothers, which I find really intriguing. But moving back to what I mentioned earlier, Rockin' Ships. Rockin' Ships, Del Boy is in this, played by James Buckley, who's there. I'll put a photo up on the screen when I edit this. But James Buckley, he plays a younger version of Del, and he does really have that swagger of Del. He doesn't sound anything like Del, but he acts like Del, so he sells it through the personality and his performance that makes you think, that's Del Boy. The same as the guy I saw in Only Fools and Horses, the musical. He really sold the fact that he was Del. I believe his name was Mark. I can't remember his surname. Sorry about that. But he really sold it through his performance that he was Del Boy. So James Buckley does an absolutely great job having that swagger, that stuff. And I also there's an episode where he wants to get engaged. So do you know what he does? He buys 5 rings and literally gets engaged to like every single girl, and they're not even real diamonds. He's got them out of glass. So he's got Yeah, I know, Del Boy, what an interesting character. But in the prequel, I do like how you get to see him acting with his friends, and you get to see that sort of that rivalry beginning of him and Slater. Obviously, and there's even a funny joke where they actually show him going into the pond. Reference if you've actually seen Only Fools and Horses, because they mentioned about him and Roy Slater didn't get on, so he'd make him go into the pond because he'd be making Bluebeard walk the plank. So that was always kind of funny that they even did that in Rock and Chips, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I think Del from the off, he's a great character, and I do love Rock and Chips because it does show the younger version of Del in eventually what he would become. Obviously, there is quite a different. David Jason and James Buck don't look that similar completely, but as I said earlier, the character, the way the swagger of the character, how the character acts, that's what sells it to me. It's nothing to do with the voice or anything like that. Once you've got the personality, you've sold me the character, and I think James Buckley definitely did that, and he should be very proud for doing that, to be fair, because that's a tough act to follow. Try and play a younger version of David Jason as Del Boy. I think that's quite a tough act to do, to be fair. To say the same as David Fennick as Clegg in First of the Summer Wine, that was obviously a tough act to follow as well. And James Buckley did exactly the same thing, so pretty cool there. James Buckley and obviously David Jason, comparing both of them really. James Buckley is a bit taller than obviously David Jason is, because David Jason is anywhere from I think like 5'5", 5'6", something like that, and James Buckley is like 5'8", so there's a bit of a height difference, but it doesn't really matter because he would have been younger, so he would have as people shrink as they get older. So that's kind of interesting. But the characterization though of them two are really great and stuff like that. But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Something else about Del Boy, as you go through all of the episodes and series, like if you compare these two series, Series 1 and Series 7, there is a clear change of Del. So Del in Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, he's a bit more, I don't think he's as over the top in a way. In some of the later episodes he shows, he will always taking cocktails and all that sort of stuff. He does take cocktails in those early episodes, but it's not like a key, big, distinctive thing of his character. And I feel like Del sometimes gets even more stupid as you go towards the end, almost as if he's becoming a character of his former self. And it happens to characters all the time in long-running TV shows. The character slowly becomes kind of different to how it was at the start, and that's just how things develop and everything. But either way, I think David Jason did an absolutely amazing job, and to carry for that so long. I'm going to mention one thing I mentioned earlier about Del sometimes being a bit mean to Rodney. There's a time when Rodney was actually a bit mean to Del, and one of these instances is in the episode Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So Del is given this really great opportunity. It's in Series 5. A really great opportunity. So Jumbo Mills comes back, who was in Rock and Chips. He comes, from Australia, saying, "Oh, I want to, I'm selling cars in Australia," and all that. I don't really know how his voice sounds. That's just a rubbish impression there. But yeah, so he comes over back to Peckham after being away since 1968 or something like that. So he comes back and he says, "Oh, Del, I want you to, work with me and do all of that sort of stuff. Why don't you come to Australia and you'll be a millionaire like me," and stuff like that. So he does that. He wants to do that. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go to Australia." And then he says to Rodney, "Yeah, you're coming to Australia with me." And then as they're doing that, they find out that Rodney can't come to Australia because he has a criminal record. And they don't want to allow anyone who's got a criminal record to enter Australia, as they would probably do anyway. So he was refused a visa or something like that. So unfortunately, that meant Del was going to go by himself. And Albert didn't want to come because he's an old man. He didn't want to move. He wanted to spend the rest of his life in Peckham, in the flat. I mean, purely understandable. Del goes on his own. He's going on his own. And he's like, I'm going to go to Australia and all that. And Del and Ronnie have this big argument, about how, why are you going? Or is I want to be something, sort of thing. Instead, like, because obviously he's sad because he doesn't want him to go. And then he says something like, so he talks about the stock. Oh, well, 24 computers that don't work, the only rug with a sell-by date. And he talks about Del as if he's like a superhero. And he says, I was just like, like a 5-year-old, at the church, at the funeral, looking in the hole where his mum was buried and all that sort of stuff. And then he says, oh, a vision appeared from the silhouette of the gasworks. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Still Boy. And there's a really great performance by Nicholas Lyndhurst in that scene. If you haven't seen that episode, check it out. It's a really good episode, by the way. And I believe it or not, I don't know whether this is true, but I believe that was going to be the last episode of Only Fools and Horses. So I don't know whether the plan was for them to go over and become millionaires, or it was just going to end there with the opportunity, awaiting them. So I don't know. But yeah, I really do enjoy that dynamic between Del and Rodney, and I think that it has a really good. They've just got a really great relationship, and Rodney hold Del back from, going and reaching his full potential to, go to Australia, which was a bit selfish of Rodney. But then when you think about how selfish Del has been to all of Rodney's opportunities, you sort of see like he deserved to do that, sort of thing. Because there's more times where Rodney has been screwed over by Del than Del's been screwed over by Rodney. So out of that time, you got to see there is kind of a difference there. But yeah, but also there is dynamic with Grandad as well, which I think is a great dynamic with Grandad. Their relationship sort of like kind and caring and sort of, and I do like Grandad sort of he's a bit of a prat sometimes, Grandad, but he's a really great character because he sort of says, it's not gonna work, and he's always right. He's always right about stuff. Grandad, he's sort of like, he can tell, that something's going to go down and it's not going to end well. And, yeah, and I think that's really great. Leonard Pierce did an absolutely amazing job as Grandad, and I'm going to get around to doing a character file review on Grandad and Rodney in the future, so stay tuned for that if you like this video so far. Yeah, but I think that, Del, as a character, obviously, I do like his relationship with Marlene as well. Marlene, obviously, Boyce's wife, I think they're really great, chemistry. They get on together. Boyce can clearly tell there's something iffy going on between them. And supposedly they dated, obviously. Obviously, it's clear to tell, to be fair. They were obviously very, very close together and all that. So they're all close together and everything like that as well. And there is that rumour that that Del's son might be Tyler, so there's a bit of an if thing, and they do look very similar, so it could have been. But moving on to Del though as a character, as we go through some of the later series, so series 6, series 7, the episode dates particularly, so Del decides that he's going to go on a date. He goes on the online dating thing because he's seen that Trigger's done that and he's ended up with someone, so he's like, oh, I better do that then. So he goes on the online dating thing, and he bumps into, on the online dating thing, Raquel. So he ends up meeting Raquel, and then they meet at Waterloo Station. He takes her to, have a steak meal and all that sort of stuff. And he lies to her, and he tells her that he's a multi-millionaire and all that sort of stuff. He plays that if he's got, he's got all of this money and stuff. And turns out she's not really an actress either. Well, she is, but not like that. So they're both lying, really, but I think Del was telling a much more worse lie, if I'm completely honest, because it just wasn't convincing, to be fair. So, yeah. But, yeah, I think that, Raquel and Del get on really well together. Apart from Del really screws, Raquel over a lot of the time. And unfortunately, Del gets arrested, so that means he can't go and see Raquel when they get separated. And then they bump into each other in the Jolly Boys Outing Christmas Special 1989, where he meets her again, and then they get on, and then from there, he's with her until the last episode, Sleepless and Pagan, in 2003. And they have a son, Damien Trotter, and he's sort of like, you know, a mini version of Del, basically, but more thuggish, I feel like, as we go on. But yeah, so I think that's all really great. Del ends up having his own family and everything like that, and that's all great. And in 1996, Del ends up getting lots of money, and he ends up being a multi-millionaire, which is everything he always wanted, because turns out there was a fob watch called the Harrison Lesser watch in the garage since the first ever episode of Only Fools and Horses. So it kind of came full circle. Del ended up a millionaire, everyone was happy, until 2001. 5 years go by, they lose all the money back in Peckham, and they get loads of stupid episodes in here. Like, I really do enjoy the 2000s episodes of Only Fools and Horses. Did they need to exist? Probably not, but I think they're still enjoyable, and they're just great bits of TV, so check them out if you're, you know, not so keen on those episodes. I still think they're good. Still a good watch, and yeah, completely there. I'm nearly at the end of this video on you know, talking about Del Boy, but Del Boy will always be an iconic character, iconic British character of, you know, TV. And despite, you know, he's a hero to many, he's a villain to some, but to Del Boy, I think the Del Boy is a great character, and he will forever be remembered as one of the most iconic British characters ever. And Del Boy will live on, obviously, you know, long after, you know, he's lived on long after, you know, Only Fools and Horses ended in 2003. So yeah, a really great character. He does always play to Ronnie that his mum said this on her deathbed. He always does repeat that all the time just to try and get Ronnie to do stuff, because he's manipulative like that. So, but Del as a character will always be really great, and David Jason did an absolutely amazing job. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in a video soon where I'll be doing one about Rodney. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I've just been rambling for 20 odd minutes about Del Boy. A great character, and will live on forever.